Before I started Parento, I was running finance and operations for a startup that made vibrators, actually, and I never had a proverbial horse in this race. Like, this wasn't something that was personally important to me. We had just raised a round of financing when my son was born. I was actually closing out some of the documents and paperwork negotiations from the hospital room. We'd go into the city, take him to museums by myself, and I would be literally the only dad there. And it's usually just like moms and nannies watching their kids, and I have my 10-month-old. But I still go to places where I'm the only dad. And to me, it's just like wild. It's like, dad was supposed to be more involved now. It's like, this is your kid. Like, raise your kid. Like, why are you not here? The reality is that people are going to have kids whether they get parental leave or not. The question is,
most conversations about paternity leave, usually starts with policy. How many weeks are offered, whether it's paid, and what is written in the handbook. Policy only works if people use it. Today's conversation, we're gonna talk about what happens when men don't take the time they're given, why that decision shapes family, teams, and even entire companies. I'm joined by our guest, Dirk. He's a founder and CEO of Parento. This is a company that's focused on helping employers offer real, usable parental leave. I'm really excited about this one for so many different reasons. Because he shares a lot about why men need to take more time off, why CEOs and senior leaders have to go first and model this, and why policy without example is just words on a page. Let's jump into it. All right, folks, I am really excited about today's conversation. As I mentioned, I'd love to turn it over to our guest to have him introduce himself and talk about just as much as he wants to share, like where's he working, what teams he's leading, and I know he's a dad, so I'd love to share about how old his kid is as much as possible.
yeah, thanks, Damon. So I'm Dirk. I'm the founder and CEO of a venture-backed startup called Parento. We are a comprehensive solution for paid parental leave. We are primarily helping companies invest in gender-neutral paid maternity paternity leave with our insurance-based solution that helps them cover the expense when an employee takes leave. But then we layer in support resources for parents at every stage of parenthood, so we can help guide them through this leave, get them back to work in their careers while being really great parents, and then helping them at any stage of parenthood, because children go through different phases and have different challenges, and want to make sure that people are supported throughout that. And I am a dad. I have a almost 3-year-old now, and I actually had him after I started this company. We didn't even know we were going to have kids when I started this. We weren't thinking we were going to have kids. So my son's actually kind of lucky to be alive in that sense. We weren't thinking we were going to have him. So it's always been a kind of a struggle to run a business, and especially a venture-backed startup with a kid, but it's very rewarding, and now it gives me a really good perspective for what the problems we're trying to solve from that parent side.
There's 2 things you said there where I'm excited to dig in. Well, 3. Number 1, if folks don't know, the idea that one of the reasons why I think Parento is different is the overall support, right? So it's not just, hey, we do insurance. It's like there's a consulting and there's resources that you share and the advocacy, which I think is so much more. And even if I think about my story, less about like, hey, take the time. It's like having a conversation about what that time means, like, was so more important to me. The second thing you mentioned was just, it's not just, hey, the birth, but like, I think in towards the end, we'll talk about what's in the works for further on. Cause you're right, till they're 18, depending on where you are, they don't leave the house. So what support does that look like? And then the third thing, which we'll speak on right now, is you started a company for a subset, or what we consider an ICP of folks that you weren't a part of. I'd love to hear where your head was at that point, and how did you get to this place of like, hey, I'm going to attack this potential issue that I've seen without experiencing the pain per se.
Yeah. Before I started Parento, I was running finance and operations for a startup that made vibrators, actually. And while I was there, I was looking to offer paid parental leave to my employees. And I'm not an HR person by background. I didn't have a kid at the time. So what we tell people is, I never had a proverbial horse in this race. Like, this wasn't something that was personally important to me. But when I was running finance and operations for this company, we would run into a lot of challenges around kind of the way men's and women's issues are treated. And then trying to run finance and ops for its company that's being kind of negatively harmed by a lot of the ways men's and women's sexual health is treated, kind of changed my perspective a little bit around like parental leave, because women are more likely to turn over after they have a child and not go back to work. And I realized this is a major social issue, and as I talked to finance leaders, discovered a lot of them weren't investing in paid parental leave because they didn't really understand the reason they should do so, even though if you talk to HR, they usually get it, right? Most people in HR are women, oftentimes they're moms, and they have a personal reason to care about paid parental leave, and they want it, but they can't convince finance. It was usually a dad that's much older. Maybe he didn't even change a diaper. So it's like, how do you convince him of the benefit and the ROI of paying somebody not to do any work for 3 or 4 months? And so that's really where, what this kind of came to me was like, hey, I have a finance background and I can speak
Mm.
to these guys and help them build the business case and understand why they should give women 3 months off, but also men. Like, why should you be paying these people for time to bond with their child, not just to medically heal and get the real maximum benefit out of it? And I realized I also want to solve like a real problem for society. Like, I didn't want to just create another freaking subscription box. Like, I wanted a real business that mattered. And so this was a problem that I felt like I could solve because it allowed me to speak directly to people who kind of think like me, being a finance guy, and help convince them why they should be investing in this because there is a genuine ROI. So how do we get them to put the money where they need to and get that benefit?
Oh, it's so much there. I like how you've thought through it, and so in a world like you did sort of experience the pain, not necessarily the way that like as a direct. There's a difference that we always talk about in sales. Like there's the direct end user, and then there's a buyer, per se, and so you sort of experience the pain from a buyer. It's so funny. One of the things I was telling my wife about, just like, and after doing research about this, is like you laid it out so plain. Like the idea that someone would pay you
Yeah,
to take time off, right?
yeah,
It's like,
yeah, exactly.
wow, like I've never heard it said that way, but like we were just talking about time off and we're in Georgia and she had 6 weeks, and we were still trying to figure out about FMLA and what does that look like. And there's just not a lot of, like people talking about it. As you were, you made this decision to say, all right, let's go after it. I'm curious because I've heard you talk about fundraising or you talk about early, parts of the company. Where did you feel like the friction came the most? And obviously hindsight is 2020, but looking back, where do you feel like there was like the greater friction?
Challenges I really kind of ran into with bringing this to market and getting out there was that being a finance guy, I understood the benefit of the insurance because when you're purchasing our insurance product, it's giving finance cost certainty, budgetability, risk mitigation, just like your health, dental, vision insurances. But that doesn't translate well to HR because HR cares about the employee experience. They care about the outcomes, and generally, you're talking to moms who have personal experience with having really bad parental leave experience, and the insurance just kind of goes over the head. It's not for them. And so the biggest kind of friction was like talking about this financial product to somebody who's not a financial person. And then we had to really kind of shift how we were selling our product. So we moved away from putting the insurance first and foremost and leaning into a wraparound services where it's about the experience, about how do we make sure these parents are supported through this leave so these moms can get back to work and these dads can take the time that they need and support their partner so they can eventually get back to work and increase overall household earnings. And so we ended up having to lean much more into the emotional component of what we're doing. And so when
Mm,
you go through like our standard sales deck, the templated folder of files that we have, there's very little mention of the insurance itself. Like we
mm,
obviously discuss it, we talk about the nuances and how it works, but the vast majority of the conversation is around the impacts the employees, the business case, the ROI for the organization, all those wraparound services that we provide. And that has significantly increased the close rate that we have because now we're really able to create a real champion with this HR person within 15 minutes. And then we can educate them to then go to finance and explain the business case and the insurance to finance, who usually gets the benefit of the insurance within 5 minutes.
and it's so interesting. Like I think I was talking to your marketing team, and one of the things that we really agreed upon is, when I go to look at a company right now, and I've worked at, I think it's my fifth venture back startup. I used to live
Hmm.
in San Francisco, and I enjoy free lunch. I I enjoy a good kombucha, but I wouldn't necessarily say, even I've had work from home stipend. I've had L&D stipend. I will tell you that I've never chosen a company because of that. But, one of the reasons I'm here at this particular company is that because of this 12-week parental leave. And so oftentimes I do think CEOs miss that, or, the founders miss this piece of like, this is the thing that is most important. And I will tell you, in the last 3 years, not just my company, many other companies out there, there's a lot of people that just don't return from parental leave. And, we have generous and I'm seeing other people who have similarly. It's just that when they think about the cost benefit analysis to return, they're like, it makes sense for me not to. One of the things I think you do differently, I've heard you said in previous interviews, is that like you're coming in and each company is particularly unique and different.
Hmm.
How did you come to that realization? Because I think a lot of people think like you have an ICP and you're saying like there's a particular subset of people that you work with and a particular company, when did it hit you that like, wait, all companies are different and it's more of the mindset that the company has versus what it looks like, what we call the demographic of the company build up?
Yeah, we really came to that conclusion after we were getting companies coming to us to the website asking for information that were not groups that we would have thought of to sell
Mm,
to. First started with like nonprofits. We were traditionally think like nonprofits don't have much money, like they can't afford to pay people this kind of money. But really, actually, no, they can't afford good salaries, but our program is really inexpensive and this is hugely desirable. So it's like kind of magnifies the benefit and it's a huge ROI for them. And then we see this trickling down to blue collar industries too, because the reality is no industry wants to lose people, right? Like retention is important to every industry. Some industries just have really high turnover costs and some have lower, more mitigated expenses, but you still don't want to take them on. And so what we really found is that it's all about the mentality of the leadership of the organization and the HR team. Like, does HR really prioritize this? Are they going to push for this? Because they usually have to advocate for this amongst a C-suite who doesn't really, again, understand why people are taking parental leave. We have, people on boards for like, I had my kid, however long ago, and I had to scotch them back to work 2 days later. Like, I don't need to take parental leave. Dads don't need paternity leave, but the world is different. And so it's all about, do the senior leaders in the company, even though they're usually an older generation, understand that the role is different, that dads want to take time to spend with their children, that it's important that women can bond and not just medically heal, and that there's a lot going on, especially financially for families. They need this time and they need this
mhm,
money in order to be more effective. And so for us, we really look more at the philosophy of the company more than the industry. And really what we see is just a difference in generosity of policy by industry. Blue collar industries, manufacturing firms are just as likely to buy as your traditional tech companies. They're just maybe not going to offer 14 or 16 weeks. And so for us, we're really looking more about like, how much has the CEO bought in? How much has the CFO bought into this type of stuff? And then does HR really want to champion this? And usually that last person is definitely wants to champion this.
yeah, yeah. Um, so, and you mentioned something, and you are a person who you're doing this. You know the stats that talks about, hey, when non-birthing parent takes, it's helpful for the birthing parent in terms of salary. We know the study shows that the bonding goes, and then even the shared work in the home. For someone
Mhm.
who's been doing this, knows the benefit, and yet the first time around, you didn't necessarily take a full parental leave. Walk me through that, especially as a CEO and someone that was leading a large team.
So we had just raised a round of financing when my son was born. I was actually closing out some of the documents and paperwork negotiations from the hospital room. And maybe a couple weeks afterward, we actually closed around, got the money in. It felt like, and they were aware we were expecting, my investors were, but there's not like we just got this money. We need to deploy funds and get the team built out. And I'd already identified some of the key hires. I was just kind of waiting to bring on once we got the cash in the bank, which we did, but they need to be trained up and educated on the program and what we found is working, and then help them understand what had to happen. And so I worked more part-time. I blocked off Fridays to make sure I didn't have calls, but it would still work. And since we're all remote, I was always home. So I was able to help out where needed, sleep in a little bit longer if I needed to because the baby was up at that night and I took care of him then. So I built in flexibility, but never really took a true leave until much later because it's really
Yeah.
important that you take that time. But I felt like the company's also my baby. I mean, to make sure this
Mhm,
is set
mhm.
up to go and grow really well.
I guess I'm curious is that you very rarely hear this spoken about. One of the things that we've been doing over the last 6 months is doing research on like what is the media saying about this? Like what are the popular voices? And so I'm grateful that you're here sharing this story. I'd love to hear like if you could even remember like talking to your wife and saying like, hey, this is what is this okay? Like
Yeah.
what was that conversation like to say, we're in the season, I'm here to support, but this other baby here, I can't neglect it.
Yeah, she's very supportive of running this business and building this business, which is great. And she knew I would have had a hard time just being fully off given the sort of critical nature of where we were. And it was her idea to mark off Fridays. She was like, as long as you mark off Fridays that you're available where you needed, you help me understand, day to day when you're not going to be available, like because you have calls and whatever. We also had help. My mom came out for 3 months and helped out,
Mhm.
and that made a huge difference. So there was always someone that helped take care of him. And I still did stuff during the day because I
Yeah.
was still working part time. It was important for me to actually be able to do that and still kind of create that bond early on, even though they're kind of just like lumps at that point. But I wanted to make sure that I was still present there and able to run this business. My wife was very supportive of it. So it really was never contentious. It was just sort of like, let's have guardrails and set expectations around how much you can or can't do. And like, let's set time aside that you actually are involved at certain points.
Yeah, I like that deep. Number one, it's the communication, and number two, like having that support where having grandparents around is always fun and super helpful, and having a supported spouse. Not many people have an opportunity to do it a second time around. How did you come to that decision?
For me, I always knew I wanted to have a proper leave where I actually spent the time with my son because so much of parental leave is both like there's just so much going on, people need time to figure it out, but also to spend physical time, be present, help the child, and bond. And I knew I wanted to do that because I didn't want to be like a lot of dads were like the child always runs to mommy when they're hurt because mommy's always been there, right? I wanted to
Yeah,
change that paradigm. And so for me, it's always very important that I actually spend more time with him when I want to actually do these things. I also realize like it's also good for our brain to actually, do to do what we say we or think is important. And so I got to the point after we got through our busy season where my son was about 10 months old that I actually did then took a real proper leave and took a full 12 weeks of leave. I broke it up and took it in three big chunks, but I,
mm,
I took it and I spent time with him. We're outside New York. Would go into the city, take him to museums by myself, and I'll be literally the only dad there. And it's usually just like moms and nannies watching their kids. And I have my 10-month-old, in the
mhm.
city with me. He'd nap in the car while we go in somewhere else and do something else. We traveled with him quite a bunch. And then I made sure that I was the one who's primarily caregiving for him, that I was spending that time with him so that we could build that bond and build that relationship where it wasn't just like him always calling for mommy every time.
I know I have the same thing too. 12 weeks off, and I go to a coffee shop, or we're in the library, or it's
Yeah.
just people are looking at me weird. It's like, where's the mommy? Like,
Yeah, it happens all the time. I still go to places where like I'm the only dad, and to me it's just like
yeah,
wild. It's like dads are supposed to be more involved now. It's like
I
this is
know.
your kid. Like raise your kid. Like why are you not
Oh man.
like here?
Yeah, it's I know Paul over the company dads, and
Yep.
we were talking about active fathers, and it's the same idea of like being present and showing up and being there. So it's crazy. It's
Being present's really important.
the fact that like people still seem like, oh my god, and it's like, why is this no longer the expectations? Um, Speaking of expectations, I'd be curious, like, how did your leadership or the overall mission change? Like, number one, having a kid, number two, and taking it. Was there a big realization, or was it just like, this was always a mission and this reaffirmed it versus like it blew open something in your mind?
No, it really reaffirmed it. We posted that I was taking leave publicly. We let people know via email too. And we had clients reaching out saying it's really great that I'm taking leave because a
Mm,
lot of them know that we're not this huge company. The CEO, the founder is taking time off to bond with his child is important generally, but especially given that, we're small and I play such an important role here. And so it was really good for the business and the brand and people really appreciate it. And so I think it really is kind of reaffirmed like, yeah, we are who we say we are. We're not I told people like I didn't want to thinks moment where like we have this public image. It's like behind the scenes. It's not that at all. It's a terrible place. It's like no, we need to actually stand behind the values that we set and put that forward.
As you come to a close, I have two more. The first one, um, I'd be curious as I'm sure you've had other CEO friends, investors. I'm sure number one, like for me, this is very inspiring to see that it is possible. Even, as you're working, we all know startups, high stakes, moving fast. What advice would you share from your lived experience around, hey, taking it and also modeling that for your team or for their team?
I would say it's very important to be prepared and ahead of it so the team understands who's going to do what is critical and has to be done and can be a reason to call, but also just what can be delayed or who can take on certain things. Because you definitely don't want to turn into this point where you're actually doing a little bit of work here and you have the ability to be present. And for me, I think it's really important that people really lean into it. Like in that moment, really take on and push yourself and challenge yourself. You might be uncomfortable to be this close to your first kid, but like do it. Really lean into it. Take on the primary caregiver role where applicable, and it's just gonna have a better relationship. You're just gonna have a better relationship with that kid.
I love that. And then lastly, you know, if anyone follows you, they'll see you share lots of stats. I'm curious, let's say
Mhm.
I'm a small business thinking about this and I have all these like buts of like, maybe not, or maybe this, or even
Yeah.
a fast growing company that we're not sure yet. I'd be curious, like, what are some maybe lesser known or counterintuitive ways of thinking about parental leave that they might not be thinking about in order to get them to say, maybe I should pay attention to this, pivotal moment in people's lives?
Yeah, I think the reality is that people are going to have kids whether they get parental leave or not. The question is whether that employee is going to have kids with your organization or if they're going to leave and go somewhere else or just quit and leave the workforce altogether. So it's sort of like, how do we prepare for this to occur? And do we want to do it in a way where we get the maximum benefit and ROI out of it, or where we do literally the inverse and get the worst cost possible out of it? Because a lot of people think, oh, if I offer parental leave, people are just going to start having kids. Like, no, the reality is they're going to have kids either way. People aren't going to decide, oh, I want this 18-year obligation because I get 3 months of paid parental leave. They are just, we're going to have their child with you instead. And that means that they're going to come back at higher rates and they're going to be more loyal and they stay longer. We have parents who've been with the same company specifically because of our program and are now having their second or third child on our program. And HR is aware this is the reason that they're with that company still, is because they have access to paid parental leave as well as these support resources that help them through this period of life. And so it's really about how do we change this thinking from like what a lot of American culture views as like this liability into an asset. And it really is an asset in this day and age.
I like that idea of like people are gonna have kids regardless, and it's either your company or someone else's company. Dirk, this has been a pleasure. If you want to share where folks can connect with you, if there's any exciting things that's coming up in the pipe this year at Parento, I'd love for you to share a little bit about that.
Yeah, they can always get more information at parentoleave.com. And we have a lot of really exciting things. We're launching a couple new products in the next couple of months. We're launching a whole new portal with tons of automations as well to help people at any time of day. And we're launching a ton of digital resources in the next couple of months as well, so that they have access to a lot of workbooks and videos. And interestingly enough, all of our products are available for the parents at home. So it's not just the
Mhm.
employee that can access those support resources. That mom or dad that's not the
Oh,
employee can also benefit from our resources.
I love that. Well, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.